Okay, we're going to start now. I think it's just 1 minute past 5. So GMT. I know we've got people listening from elsewhere, but I think we'll just get started. So listen, thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. The aim is to tell you about significant changes, significant platform changes in Access Capture. Specifically, it's feature upgrades that make our enterprise application packaging and testing automation solution more flexible, productive, scalable, and even more secure. And all while reducing your overall TCO, total cost of ownership. If you have any questions during the session, please just use the chat service and I'll get answers to each question by the end. Our speakers today are Tony Head. Tony's an enterprise IT industry veteran. He's the founder and CEO of both Access IT Automation and Access PLC, our parent company. Tony is going to discuss digital transformation and Evergreen IT. We also have David Butler-McAllister, our COO. He's the recognized leader in application management and applied automation. David's going to explain the new features within version 3. And we've also got Nick Maloney, who's our software development director, and he's spearheaded the development of Access Capture really from version 1 through to the current version. Nick's going to give a live demo of some of the modules of V3. Remember, please ask any questions by using the chat. And with that, I'm going to hand you over to Tony Head.
Andy, thank you. And welcome to every one of you in what I can see is a fairly large audience. I realise time is precious, so I'll move on fairly rapidly. I'm Tony Head, CEO of Access PLC, and for the past 36 years, yes, I've been living and breathing IT and its advancements. Not all great, I would say. After all, I do remember Y2K. Hopefully not too many of you do remember that. And maybe that's one of the reasons why in the past 12 years, we've been heavily driven and involved with automation. As a CEO, I'm very proud of our achievements as a company and stand by the investments that we've made to date. We're fairly small team, but it has over 300 years combined experience and have shown stability and reliability in what sometimes is a quick win sector by staying focused, constantly improving our products, which has a lot to do with our success. So I believe in our automation and the future of the workforce. My personal goal is to shift mindsets and to shift them constantly, especially within large corporations, from manual processes to automation as part of our specialization in enterprise process transformations. So it's not just automation just for the sake of it. It's automation that improves efficiencies, automation that reduces costs, gives stability, and covers all the risk angles. And all Access products do this, but today it's about Capture, which provides end-to-end application management and automated packaging in using leading-edge robotic process automation, covering the niche areas of that application management workflow, which is essentially everything from application discovery and suitability through to automated packaging, UAT, to production release. Capture version 3 is fully modular, customizable via our new RESTful APIs, and very much designed to easily integrate with your existing processes, no matter how complex. And we know from experience how complex these can be. Capture is predominantly used in creating an Evergreen IT environment, part of Windows as a service, Windows and platform migrations, but also let's not forget the lonesome relation in all of this, BAU, as testing, packaging and repackaging for all types of upgrades is where a lot of companies' money is wasted, and therefore we can show massive savings. On top of all the automation, Capture provides, it incorporates a simple tailored workflow that expedites the entire application management and speeds up the communication between connected parties within the process, with the ability for even non-technical staff to package and test their own applications, which in terms of application packaging and where it's come from, represents a massive shift in ownership. Business benefits include a significant saving in terms of time, cost of resources, and improvements in quality of the output that ultimately provide benefit across your entire estate, creating a real and provable ROI. So, as I've said, time is precious, and as you are here to see the new features of Capture, I'll pass over to David Butler-McAllister, who, as always, is available to expand upon any aspects of this presentation at the end, or more privately to suit you. So thanks again for your time, and it's over to you, David.
Thank you, Tony. Hello, good morning or good afternoon. I'm David Butler-McAllister. I'm the COO of Access IT Automation, and I'll be guiding you through the high-level platform changes and new features of Access Capture version 3. Before I get into the new detail of Capture version 3, I'd like to provide a reminder or indeed a refresher to the current challenges that present themselves whilst conducting application management for either Windows 10 and Office 365 programs or Windows as a Service Evergreen and business as usual support. So where have we come from? With our previous version of Capture, version 2, we noticed that our customers were required to find or build infrastructure for our product to be installed. This is a traditional approach to tooling installations, which involves many teams to create physical or virtual instances of Windows servers and virtual server environments, including network and firewall permissions, and a variety of storage and database connectivity. This, even for a POC, can take months for approvals through risk and security teams. We needed to provide a cleaner and easier approach for our POC and production installations. Application migration projects can be and are heavily resource-intensive pieces of work. Manually joining the pieces of the app puzzle together to formulate the application scope of activity from many various sources of data. This is time-consuming, repetitive, and therefore many of these tasks lend themselves well to robotic process automation and the use of RESTful APIs. For all of the Windows desktop refresh programs I've been involved in over the last 20 years, the starting phase within application readiness presents itself as a challenge. The challenge exists if your application detail is not managed sufficiently. Whilst most companies have a good application asset inventory or change management database, this data is typically manually extracted and managed within spreadsheets, and it's not integrated with other important systems such as Active Directory, Software Center, software licensing controls, and application personalization information, all of which can provide useful application install counts and usage detail. Whilst Capture version 2 joined up those dots, we wanted to ensure the detail and data points can be referenced from customers' own workflow solutions, and hence a greater requirement for RESTful APIs become apparent. Without a controlled, centralized application data, you can find yourself with multiple application version sprawl of that same product across your end user's desktop, which causes support chaos, increased support tickets, and therefore increased costs, and in some cases, issues with licensing controls and excessive bloat of your storage infrastructure. In general, poor hygiene of your application portfolio increases your total cost of ownership. Let's now look at version 3 and how we can help address where we have come from. So, where are we going? With Access Capture version 3, we wanted to ensure our framework was modern, robust, and provided us the ability to expand new feature development in an agile way. All of this whilst providing our customers options to lower their total cost of ownership with the ability to use all of version 3's modules, or for them to pick and choose the modules they require. For our POC and production infrastructure installations, we are now more agile in our approach as we've created flexible deployment strategies embracing containerization technologies such as Docker and Kubernetes, meaning that we can install Capture version 3 faster and more securely, either on-premise or off-premise with Microsoft Azure and Amazon AWS cloud offerings. We now have fully documented RESTful APIs for every method that can be called upon within each module of Access Capture. From app discovery and packaging to user acceptance testing and application deployment, we have increased our API stack to over 200 methods, which is a 100% increase on Capture version 2. Previous versions of Capture included our own security model built into the database tables and tooling. We wanted to break away from this and become more industry standard in our approach and use Identity Server and Active Directory as our defaults. While these appear minor change, Nick will guide us through how much more granular the roles and permissions are in case you have requirements for only certain users or groups of users to perform certain activities. Now we have RESTful APIs for everything that Capture is executing, we're able to output login in a more structured way. This provides support teams useful information of the application journey for each product that is managed through our automation. We're extremely proud of the work that's gone into version 3 and that we are ready for the modern desktop application management. It's not just the big rewrites of code and creation of 100% more RESTful APIs, it's also the smaller things that really matter to end users. Our automation with items that you will see today in our live demo, such as virtual machines being presented in a browser and our login of application performance data on that Windows 10 build version that the test has been executed on. I'll now hand you over to Nick Maloney, who will walk you through a live demonstration of Access Capture version 3 using our example user interface.
Hi everyone, I'm Nick Maloney. Thanks a lot for joining. Yeah, as David says, we're going to show you some of the new features in version 3. We're going to try and cover as much as we can. Obviously, time's a bit of a limiting factor, but we'll see how we get on. Okay, so what you should be able to see on the screen now is the admin portal for Access Capture version 3. This is just for administration. If you didn't want to, you could not use this. You could do all of the things that you need to do purely through the API, but this gives a bit more of a visual representation of how everything works and makes it a little bit easier for you to see what's happening. So if we get started, as David mentioned, there's some changes with how we manage virtual machines. Previously in Access Capture version 2, we had the concept of virtual machine pools where we could specify certain machines on different hypervisors to be used for different jobs. But now we have the concept of an environment where we can take resource from multiple virtual machine hosts and combine them all into one place. So if you've got some spare resource on one system and a little bit of resource on another, you can combine those to create a useful pool of machines. The environments also specify what settings are used, some settings related to queuing if jobs need to be queued. Deployment systems are assigned to environments for if prerequisites are needed or if they're used during testing or publishing. So that's a little bit about how the virtual machine management and so on has changed. So if we go into our example workflow section, this is just an example. We've added this just so you can see visually how things would be used, but this gives you an idea of how you could kick off a discovery job, a testing job, whichever type of job you need. So we're going to do a testing job here, which basically involves publishing an application to a deployment system, assigning an AD group to it. We'll then prepare a virtual machine, a clean VM, and we'll log on using a test user. So as this is designed to be used as a UAT test. You can configure the questions that are going to be asked to the user within the session. So here you can see for this test that we've got configured, we've got 2 questions configured underneath it. The idea with the tests is they can be used for a single job if you want, or you can reuse that test over and over again. So if you have a standard script that you need people to answer when they're testing different applications, you can just use the same test over and over again. So that's a little bit about test questions. So to start a testing job, we pick the environment that we want to use. If you have multiple different platforms that you wanted to test against, maybe you've got 1909, 1903, Windows 7, all you need to do is create different environments and then target those. So we'll just fill in a little bit of information that's required. And again, this can all easily be done via the API rather than the UI. This is completely optional, just to give you an idea of how it works. So we've filled in the required information. There's additional optional information that we could supply if we needed to. Okay, so the job's active. We're getting status updates on where exactly in the process the job is. There's a couple of different ways you can get the status if you're using this via the API. The most basic method would be to just use an API method to poll the job status. Alternatively, you could subscribe to messages from the messaging provider. We tend to use Rabbit, but we can implement a different provider if required. And the final way would be to use SignalR. We actually use a SignalR hub, so you can subscribe to that for notifications. Okay, so now the VM is ready. So this button becomes available, so we can connect to the VM. Okay, and as David mentioned earlier, we can display this directly in the browser, so there's no downloading RDP files or any other connection settings. It just takes the test user that's been assigned and logs them on directly to the VM. We can provide examples of how to implement this code in your front end in a variety of different languages. Like I say, this is an example, so you may want this in your own workflow if that's how you envisage using the product. The RDP's got some quite nice features. You can take screenshots, you can use the clipboard, you can go full screen if you want. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Okay, so we get logged onto the machine. The Access Capture client's already appeared on the right-hand side. So if we click Start, we're presented with the questions that we configured earlier. So does this launch? Just saw the AppV loader there at the bottom, and I seem to have clicked it twice, so we'll close one of those instances. And then you just go through your testing as you would normally. So we'll just make sure this all works for reasons that will become clear later. Okay, so we created a zip file. So does it launch? Yes, it does. We'll take a screenshot because that's required. We can annotate the screenshot if we need to put some information. That will do, I think. So does this launch? Yes, it does. Does the icon look nice? Yeah, we'll say yes for that. Okay, so once we've finished the questions, we get prompted to save the results, and that's it. What will happen then is all the data is recorded and the machine will be recycled, ready for the next usage. So that should have finished now. So we can flip over to the list of jobs. Okay, I don't think it's quite finished, but any second now. Okay, so that's complete now. So as an example of the output that we get from this, if we look at more job details, here we can see the inputs that we supplied, quite a lot of nulls because we didn't supply any of the optional information. We didn't really need it for this demonstration. And then we have an output, so we can see it's completed successfully. There's no error message. And then underneath we can see the sessions, who's actually tested it. So we've got test user 01, we've got the machine name. We can add a little bit more information into that view if we want, so we can see what machine was used, how many CPUs it had, the RAM, that kind of thing. And if we drill into this, we can see the answers to those questions. So the icon looked nice, and then here where it launches, we can see there's a screenshot attached to that answer. So that information is all stored, all available. And then the reason I actually tried out 7-zip is because one of the things that we do during UAT, this can be turned on or off, but we measure the performance of the system. So you can see these tabs, we've got the system overall, and then we've got executables that are found within the package. So if we look at the system, this is what the CPU usage looked like over the duration of the test. And obviously you can just mess around with the duration or the interval if you want, which is quite cool. But then in addition to that, we extract all of the executables from the package being deployed, and we monitor for those being started up, and we monitor the performance of those during the test. So we can see here, this is 7ZFM, and this is what the CPU usage looks like over time. We've got the memory usage of that application, and then the other application that was launched during that session was 7zg.exe. You can see this ran for a much shorter time, so only a couple of seconds, much less data points, but it's quite useful information to have because it gives you real world information about the performance on a given platform as the users are actually using it as they would in the real world. So we find that's quite useful. So that's kind of an overview of how you'd kick off a job. In this example, it's a testing job. There are the other types of jobs as well that you could do, a discovery one, a AppV sequencing job, a publishing job. But if we just move on to some of the other changes that have happened in this particular version. So as we spoke about briefly before, there's now some changes in the security model. So we're now supporting out of the box, we're supporting Identity Server and Active Directory. Identity Server is gaining a lot of ground at the moment. Seems to be really popular, especially with .NET Core. So that seems to be the market leader for third-party authentication, I'd say. But if you wanted to support a provider other than these, we can fairly easily plug that in, as long as your provider can give us a principal and it has claims attached to it, should be fine. So you add the users, and then once you have users, you can assign those to roles. Out of the box, we've got a number of roles that are pre-configured that either we use internally or we think would be most useful for people to get started with Capture. If these roles aren't what you're looking for, it's really easy to create a new role. You just create a new role here, supply a little bit of information, what you want to call it, so on. And then once it's complete, you can manage all the permissions. And this is so much more granular than it used to be in version 2. So now permissions are right down to the level of each individual API method. So you could easily create a read-only role, or somebody could have a read on most things, and then maybe they can update one particular thing. So if you see on the left-hand side here, let's just make that widget a little bit bigger. So on the left-hand side, you can see the different icons. The little aeroplane means it's an API permission. The screen means it's a user interface permission. And finally, we've got the widget permissions. There's not too many of those really. So you just select the permissions that you want and just assign them all across. And you can grab all of them, take them all away. Yeah, a lot more granular, hopefully a lot more useful when you're trying to set up roles, keeping everyone locked down, giving everyone the minimum permissions possible. So that's the main changes in the security. The licensing slightly different now. The licensing, is a lot more granular. You can have a license where you're only allowed to use one particular type of job. So maybe you only have the testing license, or you could have testing and sequencing. They can be configured for certain limits or times. So that's a lot easier to use as well. The other thing I wanted to talk about quickly was the logging. David mentioned we've moved across to structured logging now, whereas previously it was mainly just flat text. And if you're not aware of what structured logging is, it just means you can insert tokens into the logging to make it much easier to find things later on. So that's quite useful. In our environment here, as in our demo environment here, we're using the Elk stack, which is Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. It works really well. It's a nice centralized platform. You don't have to use this if you don't want. You can log to a variety of different places. You could log to SQL if you wanted, or a syslog server. We could carry on writing to text files really if we wanted, but obviously if the logging isn't centralized, you do lose quite a bit of nice functionality, especially if you're using something like the Elk stack. And then we've talked quite a lot about the API, but here's kind of what it looks like, at least the Swagger documentation. We've got quite a lot of methods now. It's not just methods that you'd use to kick off jobs, or the methods that are used internally for the user interface that you've seen is also used via these API methods. So if you wanted to implement any of the functionality of the admin portal within your own workflow, that'd be really easy to do because all the methods are already there to do that. So you could completely rewrite it or white label it, whatever you needed to do. And yeah, hopefully the technical guys have seen Swagger before, so you know what it's about. It's just a way of documenting your API so that when you're developing against it and you need to call things, it's really easy to see what kind of inputs you need and what kind of return you're going to get from that. So just as an example, we can try a method here to return all the different deployment system types, so we can see here we've got an app v5 deployment system configured, and yeah, there's a load of different methods, hopefully that are useful. I think that's about all we've got time for in the actual live demo bit, but if anyone's got any further questions, then we can get to those on the chat as we reach the end.
Thanks, Nick. That's great. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, David, as well. There are a few questions, actually, which is great. I think probably the first one will go to Nick. Nick, how long does an installation, or how long typically does an installation and integration of Access Capture v3 take?
I think it really depends on what infrastructure is available. If you're using containers and we can pull images directly from a public container repository, it could be an hour minus building all the clients. But if it's a more traditional installation on a Windows Server platform, it could take a little bit longer, a few days. It really depends on what the requirements are, but it's definitely a lot easier to install than the previous version.
Great, thanks. And then does Access Capture integrate with workflow tools such as ServiceNow? David Butler?
Yeah, I can take that one, Andy. Yes, one of the driving forces for version 3 was for us to be more agile in our integration with customers' existing tooling. We noticed customers would like to use their own workflows, but they require our modules of automation. So we've got a connector for ServiceNow that's provided out of the box.
That's great, thanks. A couple more. How is Access Capture version 3 licensed? Nick, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, can do. I think I probably covered a bit of that already in the demo. I might have got the question after that. But just to recap, it's now a lot more flexible. Previously, you had to license the whole product, which made it quite difficult if a client wanted to just use certain functionality, maybe just the testing or discovery. But now each module's licensed separately. So we can license just an individual part of it, like testing, for example, and we can easily set that up for like trial versions, time limited or job limited, and yeah, as mentioned, for all the different types of jobs.
Okay, David, there's another one here. Why is modern application management important?
Sure, Andy. So Access IT Automation's view on modern application management is that we foresee many organizations will embrace modern technologies such as Microsoft Intune, Microsoft MSIX, and various containerization solutions for either infrastructure or applications. So with our framework, we're future-proofing ourselves with version 3, so it enables us to integrate, configure, and use these technologies with minimal development time.
Great. There's one more, maybe from a competitor, I'm not sure, but what's the one killer feature that V3 provides over its current competitors?
Okay.
David, I think it's you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Andy. It has to be RESTful APIs. So with a 100% increase of methods, we can now be used. Capture V3 can be integrated into any workflow solution that can consume APIs. It's aimed at existing tooling solutions that have fantastic processes and workflow, but they really need our expertise in an automated way around application packaging, automation, and testing sign-off. The flexibility is really vast, unlocks options for customers to embrace automation across all modules, or to start small and integrate the modules they require. If you have no workflow, we have the templates of how we believe application management workflow can work. As you've seen in Nick's demonstration today, we have workflow in addition to the APIs.
David, one more. I think it's does Access replace, is Access a replacement for SCCM stroke Landesk, or does it work with those products?
So great question. It works with those products. So we're not looking to replace those products. They would be a deployment type. Any of the sort of robust package that we create, be it an MSI, AppV, MSIX, we will be able to, from our APIs, create the actual objects within SCCM and alternate deployment solutions in a very structured method. So we're not replacing them. We're enhancing and normalizing the objects that get created in these deployment systems.
That's great. Perfect. That was the last question, I think, unless there's any other ones quickly. I think that covers everything that's on there. Yeah, so we're good. So all that remains is for me to thank everyone for attending. Thank you very much indeed. We'll be doing some more of these, I'm sure, and we'll make sure that you get invites accordingly. Many thanks for attending. Thank you.